Welcome back to Katrina's Creations Knitting 101. This is lesson 4, and today we are going to work on combining the knit and purl stitch in sequence on a row so that it creates a pattern. Now over the next 3 weeks we are going to be doing different patterns that you can do with these two stitches. Now, not meaning to be redundant by continuing to work on the purl and the knit stitch, but these two stitches are the foundation stitches that most other knitting stitches are composed of. So these are really important ones to know, and they're also very versatile. Today we're going to do the ribbing stitch. The ribbing stitch is an edging stitch. It can be used decoratively, but most of the time it is used for the cuffs of socks and sleeves and waistbands and necks, and sometimes button bands on sweaters. So it's a very versatile, it's a very elastic type of stitch and has a lot of stretch to it. And next week we will be doing a basket weave pattern that you can do again with the knit and purl stitch. And the week after that we will be doing the seed stitch. So for today we're going to work on the ribbing stitch. Now here is up close what we have so far. This is your garter rows, this is your right side, this is the left side of your work. So here's your garter, here is your stockinette, which is one row of knit, one row of purl, one row of knit, one row of purl. And I'm filming at night, so my lighting isn't as great as it was earlier. But you can see it is smooth. And if you look at the back of your work, this is the back of what your purl stitches look like. There are times that you actually will do a reverse stockinette, and it is this type of a stitch. It's similar to your garter stitch over here. And this is used occasionally, reverse stockinette, but not very often. So let's start with the ribbing stitch. Now, we have 50 stitches going all the way across our fabric at this point. When you do a rib stitch, you can do several different patterns. You can do a 1 by 1, which is going to be knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. You can do 2 knits and a purl and repeat that. You can do 2 knits and 2 purls. You can do any combination as long as it works out to an even number. So because we are if you're finishing with an odd number of stitches, then you want something that's going to end with an odd number in your pattern sequence. So in this case, we have 50 stitches, so you can do a 1 by 1, which is 1 knit, 1 purl. In our case, we're going to do 2 knits and 2 purls. So let's get started. And the reason I'm doing that is because changing that often between stitches just gets a little monotonous, especially if you're a new knitter. So you're going to begin with your knitting stitch, which we already know. We're going to do 2 of those. So we'll go 2 knit stitches, 1, 2. Then we're going to do a purl. So you want to bring your yarn, you're going to bring it between the needles, and then you're going to do 2 knits. Make sure you don't have an extra wrap here. You want to make sure that you have only just brought it between the 2 needles. You don't want it wrapped around like this, where you've got an extra loop, because that will create a hole. So you just are bringing it between your 2 needles, and you're going to do the knit stitch. So we'll do 1 and 2. Then you're going to take the yarn from the middle, move it back between the needles so it's in the back again, and you'll do knit, 2. Bring that yarn. Make sure that when you finish that last knit stitch that you give it a good, not a tight tug, but you want it to be snug. Otherwise you can have gaps between your knit and purls, because it does change your tension a little bit when you're moving your yarn between the front and the back, and you don't want to end up with holes or gaps. So we've just done the 2 knit stitches. We're going to between the 2 needles again and purl 2. move it to the back, and knit 2. So you can pause your video now, and we will knit 2, purl 2 all the way across. And I'm going to put a little thing up in the screen here that will show you what that would look like if it was written on a pattern. All right, I have completed all the way across, and let's take a look at what it looks like up close. See if I can get this lighting a little bit better. Move this over here. You can see here is 2 purl stitches, here is 2 knit. I finished on a knit stitch, so your last 2 stitches in the row should be knit. And the way you can tell a knit stitch from a purl stitch, if you look up really close, the purls have a little bump. Just think of them as looking like they have little purls. So here's 2 little bumps or purls. These don't have it, they're a knit. Here's 2 little bumps, that's a purl. Here's the 2 little bumps. So if you look at them, you can see that there's a definite difference in the stitch, and they just look like tiny little purl bumps, and so that's how you can tell the difference. So now what you're going to do on this next row, let me move the camera back again. Here's the back side or wrong side of your knitting, and again you can see in this case, because you're looking at it backwards, what looks like a purl stitch is actually a knit stitch. It's going to look like a purl stitch. Now remember, we ended with 2 knit stitches. When you come back across the wrong side of the row, you will purl the knit stitches and knit the purl stitches. So, like I said, we finished with 2 knit stitches, so our first 2 stitches are going to be purl. So we're going to purl 2 stitches, and then we're going to knit 2 stitches. And as this progresses, you'll very clearly see the stitch differential, and you'll be able to tell which you're supposed to do. So right now we are purling 2 and knitting 2 all the way across to the other side. So if you want to pause your video at this point and we'll get to the other side, we'll check it out together. All right, I ended on a on 2 purl stitches. So here we go. Now let me flip this around and you'll be able to see the pattern beginning to show up. If you look very clearly here, you can see, let me move this back under the lighting again, you can clearly see the knit stitches and the purl stitches. Knit stitch, purl stitches. If you were making socks, these would be much closer together, probably 1 by 1 or a 1 by 2, 1 meaning 1 purl and 2 knits. Usually when you are doing a rib stitch, the knit stitches, there's going to be more of those, either equal or more of the knit stitches. The purl stitches tend to be less because they're the ones that go kind of the in-between spots. So this is a 2 by 2 rib. You've done 2 rows so far. You're going to continue these 2 rows for an additional 14 rows. So altogether you will have 16 rows of the ribbing stitch. And here's what it would look like if it was written in a pattern. So that is it for our ribbing lesson this week. Make sure you stay tuned next week when we will be doing basket weave stitch, which again is a combination of the knit and purl stitches. So thank you for watching. Check out my Saturday videos, and otherwise I will see you next Wednesday for our next knitting class.